Hello, and welcome to the Rise of the Sequels. In this series, I attempt to break down the barrier that divides Star Wars fans, and shed some light on why the Star Wars sequels don't deserve as much hate as they get. Many YouTubers have made videos on these movies, and so many of them are littered with biased arguments and hateful attitudes, and they're a big part of why the Star Wars hate culture arose. I'm talking about the people who viciously attacked Rian Johnson, J.J. Abrams, Kathleen Kennedy, Daisy Ridley, Adam Driver, John Boyega, Kelly Marie Tran, and thought it was perfectly fine to send insults to these people under the protection of their own screens. This fandom has become toxic, with a constant war between the fans. You can't say anything good about the sequels anymore without being bombarded with hate comments, and people telling you to kill yourself. Which is why I want to bring light to the sequels, and show some of you that they're actually not as bad as you remember. And I'll be doing this by debunking other videos on YouTube. Now you may think I've just stolen this idea from Anomaly Inc. and his Revenge of the Prequels series, and you're absolutely right. I love his idea of defending the prequels against idiotic and vague arguments, so I wanted to do the same for the sequels, hopefully just with less bias. But yeah, the link to his channel is in the description, so if you get the chance, then please check him out. For this video, I will be dissecting Vito's video titled Why the Last Jedi is a Complete Cinematic Failure. And if you want to watch this video in full, it'll also be in the description. Now is also a good time to say that I have nothing against the people I respond to. I'm sure they're great people and definitely not the ones who attack the creators. However, some of their fans probably are. So Vito probably isn't a bad person, but his arguments are dangerous, and that's what I'm targeting here. Now, I'm not going to be responding to every second of this video like Anomaly does, because that shit is repetitive and can often lead to nitpicky counterclaims. Also because not everything he says is an argument. So yeah, I'll only be responding to his actual arguments about the movie, regardless of whether or not I agree with them. Vito is just overall a good YouTuber, light years out of me, and not everything he says is something shit or controversial or insightful. I don't have a problem with him, just with his arguments.
I don't know how you make a movie as bad as The Last Jedi. It takes one of the most beloved franchises of all time, throws it in the trunk of a car, and then backs it into a river.
See, I could respond to this statement and call him an idiot for thinking this way, but that's not fair to him because he hasn't made an argument yet. You get me? Alright, great. Let's get into this then. From just the title alone, we can already tell that this man likes to over-exaggerate his arguments. Because no, The Last Jedi is not a complete cinematic failure, because that would mean that it fails in literally everything that makes a film a film. Just because you hate the movie and you hate Luke's arc, you hate Holdo, you hate Rey, whatever, doesn't mean it's a complete cinematic failure. I haven't heard anyone criticize the cinematography of this movie. Everyone pretty much agrees that it looks amazing, and cinematography is a big part of a film. So that means that at least one aspect of this movie is pretty decent, which already means that it's not a complete cinematic failure. Now, I'm not saying that cinematography is the only good thing about this movie, because there are a lot of bright spots. It's just generally an aspect of the movie that even die-hard haters agree is pretty decent. So that's why I used it. Basically, without even watching the video, I can already conclude that you won't be able to provide enough evidence to prove that this movie is a complete cinematic failure, especially not in 20 minutes. This isn't a bad thing to do. Clickbaity titles aren't bad, especially on YouTube, because it's all about making videos that people will click on, and this title is very eye-catching. However, as an argument on why a film is bad, it does tell me from the beginning that every argument you make should be taken with a grain of salt, as it might be over-exaggerated.
But I definitely have no emotional investment in this terrible fan fiction written by a gang of idiot children.
I don't know if he's one of the believers in this whole fan fiction argument like Anomaly. But just to clarify, the sequels are not fanfiction. Just because they're not written or owned by George Lucas doesn't mean it's not actual Star Wars. George Lucas sold his franchise to Disney, he gave them all the rights and creative freedom, which means anything Disney does is canon, whether you like it or not. You can choose to ignore them, and that's fine, but they're Star Wars, just as much as the prequels are. Also, my precious Rian Johnson is not an idiot child. Don't talk to my god and saint that way.
The problem with The Last Jedi is that it's a narrative cluster with a bunch of characters whose actions only make sense if you assume that they were the type of kids who had to wear a helmet to gym class.
Yes, so we start off with the characters and their messy storylines, and this criticism is one that I'm sort of split on. The two examples that you show here are Finn and Holdo, and I agree with Finn. Him learning about the terrors of war and child slavery and all this shit, it's counterintuitive, because he was a fucking child soldier. He's lived through that terror, so he shouldn't be learning this. Holdo, on the other hand, is a good character with character flaws, and a role that actually makes sense. However, I'm not gonna go into too much detail about this now, because he hasn't either. He just kind of moves on after this, so we'll hopefully come back to this argument later.
The second movie is the chance to start really defining your characters. Show us that Rey has some sort of weakness or trial to overcome, and that this trilogy is more than just the Mary Sue Space Chronicles.
How did you do that?
I don't know.
No
I've
one
learned some
trained-
ships, but I've never left the planet.
Show us that Finn is a hero and not just a vehicle for bad jokes.
I'm in charge. I'm in charge now, Phasma. I'm in charge. Bring it down.
And show us how our favorite characters from the old movies have changed and evolved in meaningful ways.
Rey does have a trial to overcome. Kylo is her weakness. She's never had any family, anyone who truly cares about her, until she met Finn. But even then, the relationship she builds with Kylo is her first ever experience with intimacy. Her arc in this movie is all about her searching for purpose. Her childish perceptions are broken on multiple occasions, from Luke not being the heroic and great man of legend, to the Jedi not being as good as she had imagined, to her parents being no one when she so desperately wanted them to be someone. Rey is constantly searching for a meaningful purpose, but when she finds that no purpose has been set out for her, she has to find her own path. And part of this is her refusal to take Kylo's hand, because even though she's been tempted throughout this whole movie, she now realizes that he's wrong. This is what in the end leads to her accepting this gray moral area of the Jedi, and carving her own path. She has a lot of trials in this movie. Also, I know I've said this over and over again, but if Rey is the Mary Sue, then so are so many other characters in Star Wars. Luke, and child Anakin, for example. It's normal that in the Star Wars franchise, characters are just good at things. Now on to Finn. Finn makes jokes, yes, but he's also a hero. His arc in The Force Awakens is him finding someone to fight for, which turns out to be Rey. In that movie, he doesn't care much about the Resistance. He only helps in order to save Rey. It's selfish, but understandable. In the beginning of The Last Jedi, Finn is trying to escape. He's still trying to find Rey. But through his journeys on Cantobite and with DJ and his whole run-in with the slave kids, he finds something to fight for. He loses his selfish purpose of finding Rey and begins fighting for something bigger. If that's not heroic, then I don't know what is. And as for Luke, he has changed and evolved in meaningful ways. But I'm sure you'll talk about this more in depth later, so I'll save my breath.
They basically played Star Wars Mad Libs. Give me the name of a character. Snoke. All right, now give me some adjectives. Pointless. Irrelevant.
This is actually quite amusing because it does sound like that's what they did at times, but also the choice to make Kylo the center villain instead of Snoke is actually a good one in my opinion, because Kylo is someone we actually care about. We don't give a shit about Snoke as a character, as a person, he's just mysterious. But Kylo actually had development in Force Awakens. If there was a villain to focus in on in this movie, I'm glad it's Kylo. We don't need to know who Snoke was. He just helped push Kylo and raise his characters further. I'm fine not knowing who he was. Of course now we do because of Rise of Skywalker, but even back then, I'm fine with not knowing who he was. Of course now we know because of the Rise of Skywalker, but even back then I liked it. It's like with the Emperor in the originals. We didn't know who he was just powerful and evil, and he pushed Vader and Luke's character arcs forward. He died without us knowing who he really was. Just like Snoke. It didn't matter back then, so it shouldn't matter now. Alright, Vito spends a good portion of this video talking about how these movies don't feel connected, since Rian Johnson wrote a completely new story, and ever since The Rise of Skywalker came out, this problem has been elevated so much higher. It's definitely the biggest problem with the sequel trilogy, because very little was planned from the beginning, so a lot of things feel disconnected. However, The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, to me at least, feel very connected, and the story flows together nicely. It's after The Rise of Skywalker came out that this truly became a problem, and since we're talking about just The Last Jedi here, I don't think this is relevant. At least I don't agree. Alright, now this next part is quite long and I don't just want to show 2 minutes of his video here because that's just plagiarism, so I'll recap real quick. He basically rewrites Finn's character arc for the trilogy with Captain Phasma as more of the center point of his arc, since Phasma essentially kickstarted his arc. He'd have Finn fight Phasma instead of the Stormtrooper in Force Awakens, in which he'd get his ass handed to him. Then in The Last Jedi we'd see how Finn has grown, and that they're equals now. And then in the third movie, they'd fight again, and Vito says this.
He will defeat Phasma on the battlefield, showing that good triumphs over evil, and completing his hero's journey.
That would be so boring. If the point of this character conflict was to show that good always triumphs over evil, then people would have gotten even more angry about that, because it's basic and, to be honest, way too similar to previous themes in Star Wars. I wrote a 4,000 word essay about the hero's journey in school, and through extensive research, I concluded that you don't need the hero's journey structure to create a fleshed out character, and often following the monomyth can lead to shallow or basic characters. I don't think structure is what Finn's character needed. It's more just that Rian Johnson didn't understand Finn properly, as some of the things he learns about slavery and war are things he should have known already, and things that Poe would have benefited much more from if he was the one learning these things. Finn's character in The Force Awakens is amazing, and his character in The Last Jedi is flawed, but your solution wouldn't have fixed him. Some of the things people point out are valid points of criticism, but they don't know why, which is so evident here, since this solution to Finn's arc is even worse than what you're criticizing. Finn is a morally great character, and him just learning that good triumphs over evil would be exhaustively boring to me. This is a problem I see a lot. People hate so dearly on something, but then their own ideas are just as flawed. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but there's a deleted scene of Phasma climbing back up to where Finn was during their fight at the end, and a bunch of stormtroopers come with her, But Finn exposes how Phasma was the one to put down the shields of Starkiller Base, and the stormtroopers start questioning her authority. This is a brilliant scene and gives so much more depth to Phasma and the loyalty of her troops. I can't understand why they delete it. It makes no sense. If you haven't already, then go watch it, because not keeping that scene is a big mistake. I'm not trying to say Finn's character arc is perfect in this movie, because obviously it's flawed, but so many people just don't know why, and I think that's even more important to point out. Then he goes on to say that the expectation subversion in this movie is not subversion, but rather just unpredictable, which he says doesn't make it good necessarily. And I agree with this. A film can have plenty of twists and turns and still be horseshit if they're not purposeful. However, I believe that this film does it well.
Let's count them out. 1. In a highly dramatic moment, Rey finds Luke and gives him his lightsaber. But gotcha, Luke doesn't give a shit and chucks it off a cliff. 2. A TIE fighter destroys Leia's ship, leaving her to die in space. But gotcha, she has floaty force powers so she doesn't die. 3. Finn and Rose have to find the master codebreaker. No other person in the galaxy could possibly handle disabling the hyperspeed tracker. But gotcha, turns out this random ass just happens to be capable of doing the exact same shit. 4. So they go with the tweaker dude to shut down the hyperspace tracker. But gotcha, it's a trap. 5. Holdo is an incapable commander who is going to get everybody killed. But gotcha, she's actually got a super cool secret plan. 6. Snoke is an amazing and important Jedi Master. Gotcha, he's just a guy and now he's dead. It doesn't matter. 7. Rey's parents. Oh my god, we have to find out who's Rey. No, gotcha, they're nobody. It doesn't matter. 8. Finn's gonna die. No, gotcha. 9. Luke fights Kylo Ren to the death. But gotcha, it was a force project. He was a magic ghost. But gotcha, he dies anyway. Then double gotcha.
I agree that them conveniently finding another codebreaker is weird, but this is not a twist. It's just convenient storytelling, which is just a problem with the film. I also agree that Snoke just being killed like that is lackluster, but like I said before, I don't really care. Rey and Kylo were so much more interesting anyway, so I don't mind it. And yeah, the whole Rose saving Finn from killing himself is annoying because it could have been a good moment for film. It would have solidified his arc of him finding something real to fight for, as dying to try to save the Resistance would have been purposeful development for him. However, that's the extent of my agreement. The rest of your points are flawed. Luke throwing away the lightsaber is a powerful subversion that bluntly snaps us into the reality of what Luke has become, which is the backbone of this whole story. The only reason you didn't like this action is because you don't agree with Luke's character in this film, and it's blinding you. DJ betraying them at the end is well done, because there has literally just been a subversion of him actually not being such a shit person by giving Rose her medallion back. And then BAM! They're betrayed. It brings complexity to DJ's character, and it highlights one of the themes of this movie, that life is more complex than just light and darkness. DJ isn't evil. He's just opportunistic. It's good subversion. Holdo having a secret is fine, because of course she would. And why would she trust it with Poe? They're pretty certain there's a spy on board, and Poe has just been demoted by Leia, who's out of action now. What is she supposed to do? Tell a lower ranking officer her whole plan for the safety of all the people on board? Of course not. If the CEO demoted the store manager to cashier, would the new CEO trust the cashier with the secrets of the company? Fuck no. Okay, that's a shit analogy, but you get the point. This is not supposed to be a subversion or a twist, it's just a desperate person who has been in charge of an entire resistance, knowing fully well there's a traitor on board, being afraid to trust the people around her. Yes, not trusting Poe is a mistake, but she's a human being in a tense situation. It's hard to think clearly. Some of you people just don't understand how people work. Rey's parentage is the most important subversion of the whole film. It's so purposeful. The fact that she's no one is not some cheap method for Johnson to avoid the question. Being no one is the hardest possible thing for Rey to hear, because she's always believed that she's special because of her heritage, that she has some predetermined destiny, but she doesn't. She's just a regular girl with no family. Her having to find a purpose from this knowledge is engaging and realistic. If you're honestly annoyed that she wasn't a Kenobi or a Skywalker, then you need to grow up. This whole subversion got shit on in Rise of Skywalker, and it doesn't work as well. Luke being a force projection is the only option that could have explained his old age and lack of fighting experience. Luke was never an Anakin or a Yoda level of Jedi. That's not what made him special. It was his resolve, his determination to see the good in people. He was never overpowered. If he had actually been there and gone out and faced down the First Order, then he would have died instantly. I don't know what people expected, but this calmer and more calculated approach from Luke shows us actual growth that has happened throughout this movie. And Kylo, not realizing Luke wasn't real, fully shows us Kylo as an anger-driven and impulsive. It's come full circle from when Luke was the impulsive one. Also, don't say a word about Luke's death. That shit is emotional and perfect.
Here's the thing. The I am your father reveal from Empire is so great because it's completely unexpected. But The Last Jedi has so many plot twists that you stop being surprised by them and just start getting annoyed.
Most of these things aren't even plot twists. They're just plot points. Yes, Daddy Vader is one of the best and most iconic plot twists of all time, but that's completely different than what this movie is trying to do. Personally, I love most of the subversion in this movie because it's purposeful. Luke throwing the lightsaber is purposeful. Rey being no one is purposeful. Luke being a forced projection is purposeful. It really doesn't annoy me at all, and it shouldn't annoy you either. Now we're moving into very dangerous territory. Feminism.
Now, first of all, this character obviously should have been Admiral Akbar or Mon Mothma or someone the audience actually has an emotional connection to, but okay, we're stuck with the lesbian bookstore owner.
First of all, who the fuck has an emotional connection to Mon Mothma or Admiral Akbar? Akbar is a meme, nothing more. It would have been fucking ridiculous if this hench-ass fish was given actual meaningful dialogue with Oscar Isaac. People would have laughed so hard. Secondly, the fact that it's a new character makes us more suspicious of her. If it was just Mon Mothma, then the whole traitor arc wouldn't have worked as well because we know she's a good guy. Holdo was a perfect addition to the story.
The real problem, however, is Holdo's bafflingly idiotic decision to have a special secret plan for no reason whatsoever.
Ah yes, for no reason. I already talked about why Poe wouldn't just be told the plan, so I won't get into that again. But of course she's told the plan to some people. The people closer to her. The people she knows she can trust. They probably know it. We just see Poe's perspective, which is what we're supposed to, and it sets up this conflict so well. She has no obligation to tell Poe the plan. Also, Vito says that Holdo should have told Poe the plan after he commits mutiny, which is one of the dumbest things I've heard. Who the fuck would do that? Ah yes, my subordinate wants to know my plans for our survival, but I'm not sure if I can trust him because he could be an enemy spy.
12 seconds later.
Oh no, he just threatened me and locked me up. I'm gonna tell him the plan now because I can trust him. Do you know how idiotic that sounds? Why would she do that?
Now here's the thing. What is the moral of the flawed interactions between Holdo and Poe? The most obvious moral is to be subservient to authority and blindly trust your superiors.
That is just not the moral lesson. That's not what Rian Johnson is trying to say. I mean, yes, you need to follow what your superior tells you, but not blindly. It's not just Poe who's in the wrong here, Holdo is too. She makes mistakes in being so secretive, so dominant. It's a character flaw. The theme is failure that we pay for and learn from our mistakes. That's the moral. Not that blind obedience is the correct path. Did you even watch the movie?
Poe thinks he's a better leader than Holdo because he's a man. So he starts mansplaining. And look at this mansplaining. Such a mansplainer. But what he really should have done is trust women.
Star Wars fans really hate the idea of women being characters in movies. Holdo, who thinks for herself and has character flaws, is a big no-no, because she's social propaganda. But Padme in Revenge of the Sith, who's the housewife of Anakin, and has no personality except for crying, is a perfect character. Poe is not mansplaining anything. This conversation would be no different if Holdo was a man. Stop blaming the representation of women on why Star Wars is ruined. It's not blatant social commentary unless the story is being hindered because of it. Which it's not. Honestly, this argument makes you sound sexist, which you probably aren't, but you're not helping yourself.
Everybody getting killed because they didn't trust women enough. Jesus f***ing Christ.
What the fuck? I have no idea what you're on about here. Alright, next he talks about hyperspace, and actually makes a good point about how the rules of a shared universe should match up with each other, and he shows a lot of things in Star Wars that breaks this rule. But honestly, most of these don't matter much. Does anyone have a problem with midichlorians? No, it's just another way of explaining things. A contrasting way of explaining the Force. So even if lightspeed was ruined in this movie, is it really that bad? Well, yeah, maybe. But let's first see if it's ruined.
Hyperspace used to be a pretty simple concept. Your ship isn't just traveling really fast because then you would smash into planets with the force of a nuclear bomb. No, you enter like a different dimension and then pop out a wormhole somewhere else. But Rian Johnson believes that hyperspace is just going really fast. So fast that a mid-sized cruiser traveling at hyperspace can apparently destroy not only the flagship of the First Order, but like a couple Star Destroyers as well. What the f***?
I don't have enough knowledge on how lightspeed in Star Wars works, but I'm pretty sure it's dangerous because Han Solo said it is. So what can make it dangerous? Well, maybe the ship would fall apart, but that doesn't satisfy me. I can only imagine that it's because you could hit something, but maybe that's just my ignorant mind playing tricks on y'all. I really love the lightspeed ramming scene. I don't care if it hasn't been done before because who the fuck would try such a thing? It's a 1 in a million shot. It looks stunning though. The lack of sound is intense. It's just a visually fantastic scene. So I don't care if it's against Star Wars lore because it doesn't hurt the story. You know what? If you want it, then you can have it. Good argument. Then he talks about the throne room fight scene and the messed up choreography of one of the guards. And yes, this is a flaw. Even though I like this scene personally, the initial long shot of it is filled with mistakes, so good job, that's a solid point. Then he talks about the humor and how it's annoying and childish and too reminiscent of the MCU, which is true. But whether this is a bad thing is up to the individual. Humor is extremely biased. I for one find farts and penis jokes funny where you probably would find equal pay funny. Main point is that humor is subjective, so it doesn't work towards saying this movie is a complete cinematic failure. It just helps explain why you don't personally like it.
Number 7, Rose sucks.
Rose. Everyone's his most hated character. Definitely the character I like the least in this movie. She's just too good. There isn't much moral greatness to her, like with a lot of other characters. And of course, her miraculously catching up to Finn and then saving him is annoying. I'm so glad Finn just doesn't reciprocate when she kisses him. Fuck me, that was awkward. However, is she the worst character in Star Wars? Fuck no. For one, she actually has character traits and motivations. She has purpose. When compared to Jar Jar or Mace Windu, or Padme in the third one, Rose isn't the worst, but still not good. However, her saving Finn, as annoying as it is towards Finn's arc, makes sense because yeah, the little dingy would have done nothing to the canon and Finn would have sacrificed himself for nothing.
Didn't everybody die? Didn't the entire Resistance get reduced to like 12 people aboard the Millennium Falcon? So why is everybody smiling and patting each other on the back? All your friends are dead. I know you're all excited that you inspired 8-year-old boys around the universe, but come on.
So they can't be relieved to have survived? If you made it out of this situation alive with some of your friends still alive, wouldn't you at least be somewhat happy or content? Yeah, so many people died and they'll all mourn for those fallen heroes, but come on. Don't just hate on everything for no reason. Also, he compares his ending to Empire and says that they should be the same and how this one is too lighthearted at the end. But, no. The Resistance is pretty much gone and the First Order is in the hands of a vicious psychopath teenager. To me at least, it looks very bleak.
Let me be very clear. This character is not Luke Skywalker. Even Mark Hamill knows that this character is not Luke Skywalker and was trying to tell people about that until Disney told him to shut his fucking mouth.
Who is this guy? How did the most optimistic, hopeful character in the galaxy turn into this hermit? That's not what a Jedi does. I mean, a Jedi is optimistic, a Jedi has tenacity, he never gives up.
Well, perhaps Mark Hamill doesn't truly understand Luke then, or has a different perception of him. At least it appears like it. Yes, Luke was eventually the optimistic and hopeful boy, but not without obstacles of doubt and failure. In the originals, Luke is bratty and gets annoyed all the time. He rushes into things, he's impulsive, he has moments of darkness, of evil, times when he gives into the dark side and loses control. Luke was never a good character because he was perfectly optimistic. He was an amazing character because he was realistic. We could all see ourselves in Luke and his struggles. This is who Luke is, not just the face of optimism. He saw good in his father, but he also lost control against his father. Luke is not perfect, and that's what made him so intriguing, and I guess Mark Hamill forgot about that. Also, what is his description of the Jedi? Tenacious? Like Poe from Kung Fu Panda? He's tenacious. That's not how I see Mace Windu. He's not optimistic, he's rather the opposite. Guys, don't use Mark Hamill as your argument as to why this movie sucks ass. There's a reason he's an actor and not a screenwriter. Using Mark Hamill is not a good argument.
Now, it would be one thing if he started off the movie like an angry old man and then slowly rediscovered hope and returned to his old ways, but that never happens.
That's exactly what happens in this film. He's a grumpy old man who's filled with regret and remorse because he failed his own nephew. It's a man broken down into his lowest self, and his arc in this movie is about him getting past this. Him returning and facing his failures and accepting his legendary title is emotional, and it's done so well. The best parts of Luke's character in the original trilogy shine in his final moments. His bravery, selflessness, and badassery. Luke is my favorite part of this film. And that's the video. That's why Star Wars The Last Jedi is a complete cinematic failure. You're convinced, right? Because I'm certainly not. He doesn't even say that it is throughout the video. He just calls it bad at the end, which is a very powerful rating. No, but the thing is, The Last Jedi is not a perfect movie. Heck, it's not even great, but it's not bad or even shit either. There are plenty of things to enjoy and plenty of things to dislike. Luke, Rey, and Kylo's arcs are all written brilliantly, but Finn and Rose, not so much. The cinematography and set designs are beautiful at crafting tone, whereas some of the choreography is lazily executed. The acting is arguably the best in the whole series, but the Canto Bight chase scene is a useless scene. There are so many things to praise this movie for and so many things to criticize it for, but calling it a complete cinematic failure is ignorant and completely wrong, because that would mean it fails on every filmmaking level, which it doesn't. I personally understand a slightly over-exaggerated title. It helps you reach over 8 million views. But when regarding the Star Wars fandom, which is already the most toxic fandom in the world, such a title is dangerous. When Mark Hamill started criticizing the movie, rabid fans saw this as an opportunity to send death threats to Rian Johnson. And when big YouTubers started flaming this film online, it gave people the motivation to viciously attack the actors on Twitter. I have no problem with people disliking this movie, even though I personally really like it. I realize and I accept that it has flaws like all movies do. But the whole point of my Toxic Star Wars fans videos in this new series is to call out people for being toxic and malicious for no fucking reason. Vito is not a bad person, I think, but he's part of the hate culture. something that has hurt many people. Daisy Ridley deleted Twitter because many people were harassing her. A similar thing happened to Kelly Marie Tran, who really got the worst of it. And she didn't even write the character. She just did her best to please the director, and she got shit on for it. That's not okay. And most of these psychopaths who hate the sequels to death simultaneously praise the prequels as goddesses material, even though that trilogy is also littered with flaws. People are just too caught up in their own biases and opinions that anything that even remotely counters them, they see as a target for their malicious attacks. It's poisoning the fandom of one of the biggest franchises ever, which is just sad to see. I love Star Wars a lot, but this fucking fandom is ruining it. I sincerely hope that my videos spread awareness for this problem, and help people see that the Star Wars sequels aren't as bad as everyone says they are. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching. If you have any suggestions on who to cover next, then leave them in the comments below. If you want to talk more about this issue, then join my Discord server. The link will be in the comments. If you want to start a civilized discussion in agreement or disagreement of my points, then please do so in the comments. Anyways, I hope you're all staying safe. Peace out.
お前はもう死んでいる。何